Curtis Calhoun here with MMA News, and it's always great catching up with my next guest. Danny Sabatello is another big fight coming up. Bellator 301. It's a bit of a Chicago homecoming for Danny as well. How's it going, Danny?
Going great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. First things first, obviously, you got this big fight coming up with Raufeon Stots, and I want to get to that in a minute. But how great is it for you to have this experience of fighting back home in Chicago, and how pumped are you again for this opportunity?
Yeah, this is a dream come true. Everything about this is fucking awesome. I'm from Chicago, so to go back home and finally fight in Chicago is just everything I've ever dreamt of. Coming up on the regional scene, I fought predominantly down here in Florida. I never had a fight back up in Chicago. So I've got a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of fans that have been waiting to see me fight in Chicago. And we're just going to absolutely blow the roof off this Bellator event. I think it's going to be absolutely insane. Probably one of the most chaotic Bellator events there are. I got a lot of fans up there, a lot of people that are very excited for the show. And I just can't wait to get in there. And what better way to beat the shit out of Raufeon Stots while I'm up there. So everything is perfect about this. It's pretty much just set up for me to go up there and just put on a fucking show.
I was about to ask, are you expecting a bunch of friends and family and all that to be there up in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. I tell a lot of people that other than Chicago and outside of Chicago, maybe down here in Florida, other than that, everybody's going to be booing me. Everybody fucking hates me. I love it. They're going to fucking want me to die in there. But once we get to Chicago, once we're down here in South Florida, the tables have turned immensely. I have very passionate, very loving fans. That's the type of fans that people don't really see online, but I got a ton of them up there in Chicago. A lot of them are going to be going for me in Chicago. I have a lot of tickets being sold right now up there. So I do know that the crowd is going to be absolutely for me, and it's going to be a bit of a rude awakening for Rufus.
With the people that you grew up with, and obviously your family too, like when they see your MMA journey and how far you've come in your career and your life, I mean, what's their reaction? Because obviously, there's not too many people in the world that could say that they grew up with a person that's now a professional MMA fighter.
Yeah, well, the type of people that I grew up with weren't all fighting type people. They weren't all wrestling background type people. A lot of people growing up didn't even know what MMA was. It wasn't really that big back then. But the way I competed and the way my mindset and attitude has been my whole life, I think people knew I was destined for greatness no matter what it was. It just so happens to be that I'm an MMA and absolutely love fighting motherfuckers. So I think it's not too much of a shock to people that I have this crazy personality, because that's how I am outside of the cameras and outside of the limelight. And it's not too crazy to understand that I'm in fighting, because I've always been a pretty violent, pretty vulgar type person. But it's just cool for me to see everybody have my back. I get a lot of messages daily that they can't wait to come to the fight up in Chicago. They know it's going to be crazy. Most of the people are intelligent in the sport up in Chicago, and they know that the backstory with Raufeon is unfinished business. It's violent business that is going to happen. No matter who I was going to face in Chicago, I think it was going to be absolutely bonkers for me, but it just makes it even better that it's against Rufus. And I know a lot of people are just waiting up there for me to put my hands on this motherfucker and finish him.
I think this is like the third or fourth time that we talked during your career. And one thing that I've never asked you before is, obviously, you mentioned in Chicago that, not a lot of the people that you grew up with were, even knew what MMA was or weren't even really in that community. Like, how did you get introduced to MMA in Chicago? Or was it kind of something that kind of developed over time?
Well, I've kind of just strayed away from my own path, growing up. In school, whether kids didn't really know wrestling or MMA, I kind of always had an interest in it on TV or in the family. My cousins wrestled, my uncles, my dad, my brothers, they all wrestled. So I kind of had family to lean on and to go to with MMA and wrestling. But it didn't really matter. I like surrounding myself with successful people, no matter whether it's in the fighting world or just the real world. I think whether it's in the fighting world and it's violent, or in the real world, if you have positive and successful people, that wears off with you no matter what aspect of life it is. So I've kind of just had that kind of mindset. If I'm hanging out with other fighters, it's great. I can relate to them. And if I'm not hanging out with other fighters, I also can relate. I think they think I'm a little bit different with my mindset, because they're not used to somebody that's an absolute freak job, always wanting to punch people in the face. But that's just kind of how I've been my whole life. And I wouldn't change it for the world. The people up there in Chicago are the best people in the world. They're the most down-to-earth people, and they understand fighting. They're big fans of me, so I owe it to them to put on a big show for them.
When you look at this rematch with Raufeon Stots, and obviously this is part of a big card, Bellator 301, I got to ask you, like, how did this rematch come together? Because I think a lot of people expected that this fight would probably happen again at some point down the line. But did this get booked and happen sooner than you expected, or how did this kind of come together?
I've been calling for this ever since that he got and granted the judge's decision up in Connecticut. So Bellator knows I've been just waiting and fixing to get my hands on this motherfucker. I think Bellator also understands that this is a massive fight that fans have been calling for this whole time. And the timing is just absolutely right for this. I think it's a massive fight, title implications also. And then obviously with all the rumors going on, you never know what's going to happen. They just want to have this be a massive card. And what better way to have it in Chicago, because those are just amazing fight fans. So this fight came together a few months ago, but I think it's been in the works for a year now, ever since that I did technically get that loss, even though I did beat that motherfucker. But yeah, I mean, I've been putting my fist to this guy's fucking skull ever since that night that I lost to him. So I think it's been in the works for a while now, and just finally it's come to fruition. No matter what was going to happen, I was going to fight this guy. The job wasn't done there. Everybody knows it. There were too many question marks. A lot of people had me winning this fight. And whether I won that last fight or lost that last fight, according to the judges, I still would want to fight this guy again, no matter what. If it were up to me, I would fight him every fucking weekend, because I don't like this motherfucker. I never will like this motherfucker. This will never be done. Even after I beat the shit out of him in Chicago, I'm still going to want to fight him again and again and again. I want to inflict as much damage and sorrow on this motherfucker as I can. I absolutely hate this guy, and I always will for the rest of my life. This will never be finished.
What specifically about him fires you up?
The type of person he is, I've always hated. But one thing that has really gotten under my skin and gives me a little more oomph in these practices is after he was granted the decision, which was just an absolute miracle, he wasn't cool about it. He still said, "Fuck you, Sabatello," after he got his hand raised and in the interviews. And that's just not cool to me, no matter who you are, no matter what organization, if it's UFC, Bellator, PFL, One, Ryzen. After the fight, for about 10 minutes or so, you kind of give your props. And I've always done that to my opponents after I've beaten them. I've always been cool with them and say, "Nice job." He was granted an absolute miracle, and he wasn't cool after. So that's just how I'm going to have to get my revenge back. And, if I'm not cool about it after I win, he brought this upon himself. I normally, everybody that's followed my career, after I win, I always am cool for about 10 minutes. And then I get back on my grind. But I'm going to return the favor, and he started this shit, and I'm going to finish it.
In terms of, since the last time you guys fought, what are some of the biggest ways that you feel like you've grown personally as a fighter, ahead of this this rematch? Obviously, there's probably you're always improving, you're always looking to grind and get better. But what are some ways that you feel like you've personally grown since that first fight?
Well, for starters, I've grown everywhere. I was newer into the sport when I fought him. I didn't have too many fights. So just with time and training down in South Florida at the best gym in the world at American Top Team, I have no choice but to get better in this sport. I'm just continually evolving. I don't think I'm at my peak and my prime just yet. But I'm so much better than I was a year ago just with time. When you have the best coaches in the world, the best training partners in the world, you gather a lot of information and you just get better. But also with getting better is experience. And, I've had a lot more cage time in them. I kind of understand how to trick the judges a little bit, be a little bit sneaky and a little bit smarter in there. With that fight, I had all control time, but not too much damage. And neither did he. But he had no control time. So I think I've just gotten a little bit smarter in the way I've performed, and getting that cage experience is just absolutely massive. You know how to conserve your energy. You know how to strike and just go balls to the walls. With this fight specifically, I know that I just need to go balls to the walls the entire time. My last fight with Raufeon, I vividly remember having about 15 minutes of control time and thinking, you know what? I'm not taking any damage. He has no control. I have all control. So why would I risk anything and give up the position and give up anything where he can inflict damage? So I kind of just coasted a little bit. I never would have thought I would have lost that fight according to the judges. But now I know sometimes judges make bad fucking decisions and they don't know what they're looking at. So all you can do is just go for broke from the moment that bell rings to the moment fucking rings when it ends. So this is a 15-minute 3-round fight, and I'm going to go balls to the walls no matter what, whether I'm on top, whether I have position, whether I have a secured position, no matter what's going to happen, I'm going to try to break his fucking skull.
As one of the faces of Bellator right now, I got to ask you, obviously I know you're focused on this fight, but as a fighter under the Bellator banner, what is it like for you, preparing for a fight, Bellator 301, where a lot of people are wondering if this could be the last ever Bellator event? Like, what, as a fighter under Bellator's banner, what is that like for you? Like, what are your thoughts on the rumors and just all that?
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on. I'd be lying if I said I didn't hear the rumors. We all hear the rumors. I hope that Bellator stays the same just because I love fucking Bellator. Pretty much everybody that you talk to in Bellator loves Bellator just because they put on such great shows. They're so nice to you. Whether it's the president and Scott Coker, who's the absolute man, or the guys that are calling the fights, or the people behind the scenes, everything about Bellator is ran smoothly and they really take care of you. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be the face of this company. I hope it stays that way. If they sell, okay, nothing really changes out of my book. As long as I'm a professional fighter and I get to fight people, I will be happy. So whatever happens, happens. I don't put too much stock into it. You hear a different rumor each week, really. I don't think anybody really knows what's going on. So I try not to think about it too much. That's just unneeded stress. If they do sell, or if they do get a new investor, or if, this is all bullshit and it stays the same, doesn't really matter too much to me. My first love and my only love is fighting and beating the shit out of people, getting paid to put on absolute performances and be entertainment for the people and fuck people up along the way. So as long as I get to do that, I'm going to be happy. With the rumors, I don't know truly what's going on. Doesn't fucking matter. All I know is that I'm going to beat the shit out of Raufeon Stots in November in Chicago. And that's all I'm geared towards. After that, I will have another fight. After that fight, I'll have another fight. So really, it doesn't really matter too much to me. It doesn't matter too much to the fighters, really. If I were to give any advice to any fighters out there, don't listen to anybody. Most people that are going to start a rumor, they don't fucking know what they're talking about. So we'll just see how it plays out. We'll see what happens. I don't think too much of it. But I absolutely love Bellator and I love performing for them.
I got to ask you too, like, as somebody that's obviously, really familiar with the business side of fighting, right? Obviously, you're great at marketing. Obviously, you're a great fighter too. But I got to ask you, like, in terms of how this could potentially impact the fight business with a rumored Bellator PFL merger, like, how do you think that could impact the fight business in general? Like, do you think that's good for the sport, bad for the sport, kind of a little bit of both?
Well, there's just too many question marks there. I think the more promotions there are, the better, obviously. But also, if you combine two big promotions and make a mega promotion with the PFL, who's very elite, and Bellator, who's also very elite, that's also great because you're also competing with the likes of the UFC, Ryzen, One. So we just don't know. It could be great. It could be terrible. One thing about business is you never know what's going to happen. And the second you start listening to other people and think they know what's going to happen, they don't. This world's crazy, crazy stuff happens. So, I think if PFL and Bellator does merge, it can be amazing. And it could also suck. We just don't know. There's too many question marks. And you can't really compare this to the business world or other things that can happen because you just don't know. You haven't really seen this before in MMA because Bellator is absolutely massive. The PFL is also absolutely massive. 10, 20, 30 years ago, we didn't have that. There was really only one or two organizations that were big. But if you combine the PFL and Bellator, you have no choice but to realize that that's just an absolute megastar lineup. The PFL has very elite fighters. They're very fucking good over there. The Bellator promotion, we have very elite fighters. A lot of people do understand we have some of the best fighters in the world in Bellator. In the UFC, they're also very elite. They have some of the best fighters in the world too. I think the more you educate yourself in MMA, the more you realize that there's talent everywhere. But obviously MMA is a newer sport. It's growing every single fucking day. All I want is this sport to just get bigger and bigger. And hopefully the business people behind it make that happen. All you can do as a fighter is put on a fucking show, market yourself, fucking win fights. It starts with winning. I talk a lot of shit and people know that I'm very exciting with my words, but this all happens because I'm such a fucking elite fighter and I'm going to show that against Stots. But yeah, with the likes of all the rumors and everything, who knows what the fuck's going to happen. I do have a feeling that it is going to be very good though.
Absolutely, man. Well, last question for me. I just, want to give you the platform and the time to send a message to Raufeon Stots, your fans back home getting ready to watch this fight. I'll give you the final word before we get out of here, man.
Yeah, Raufeon knows I won that first fucking fight, and this one's going to be absolutely even easier for me. I'm coming to finish this motherfucker. Going to torture him first. Obviously, it's what I do. Going to get him tired, bloody, sweaty, make his fucking mind just absolutely go bonkers. Something he's never fucking felt before. And it's going to be a pleasure for me because I'm going to do it in front of the best MMA fans in the world, and that's in Chicago.
Well, we are pumped up to see it, man. Well, Danny, it's always great to catch up with you. All the best with these next few weeks. Obviously, it's a very exciting time for your life and your career. And I'm sure we'll chat again soon, man. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you again.